Well, transportation is a very challenging service to get for people with disabilities. Although I will say, it depends on what your disability is. And so, if you are someone that uses a wheelchair, transportation can be very challenging. It's going to be especially challenging. So, and then within the scope of being a person that uses a wheelchair, you know, are you somebody that can say pivot and transfer into a car? Can you self transfer? If you can do things like that, then you might be able to schedule an Uber, depending on how portable your chair is, things like that. Um, but if you're a power chair user, then that can be very challenging. And, um, you know, I'd say it's challenging in so many, in so many levels. So number one, just accessing providers is challenging because there are not a lot of providers. Um, and then and let's say you can find a provider, then the challenge is it can either be expense or you pay for it in convenience. So, just as an example, some of the programs that we have available, and I don't mean we as an agency, but I just mean we as a society, have available for people with disabilities that say need to use, like say rapid transit or a service like that. Um, the primary complaint that I hear from people with those services is that they have pickup windows, and so sometimes, and I think and I don't say this to disparage the people trying to provide those services because I'll just say it's best to assume that everybody's operating in good faith and trying to do the best they can. But you know what happens sometimes is that um, there's a window given, and maybe the windows between you have to get to a doctor's appointment. Maybe your doctor's appointment at 8 or something, and so they're saying, okay, hey, we'll pick you up between 6 and or maybe like 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. or something, and so that's not a great example, but the stories I've heard are, so then people are waiting around for, maybe an hour, 2 hour. That's probably an extreme example. But still, there can be a lot of waiting. And so people with disabilities, basically, generally speaking, don't get to access transportation with the same level of convenience that people with, say, able bodies get to. Um, Somebody with an able body can, dial up an Uber or dial up a Lyft or something. Yeah, you may, you're at the mercy of whatever the pool of, drivers is that's available to offer you the ride. But, you know, you're not, so like for these other services like, Rabbit, um, if you don't want to miss that window, you know, and that window, I mean, they can come at, any point in time during those windows. I remember one time I was helping a guy. This was back when I was working as a personal attendant, and I was helping a fellow go to school, and a really cool guy, and we were, I mean, he lived in Harrisburg, actually not far from our office here, and he was going to school it was off of Derry Street. Again, not too far from where he lived, but I remember we had to ride the bus. And I can't even, I'm just thinking back. I, there was multiple occasions that this happened. One time we had another person, like we had to give another person a ride on the way back. But my point is this, and then another time we didn't. I think that was actually it. There were a number of times where we didn't have another person to drop off, but yet the ride back took like it just seemed excessively long. And it wasn't like when you drive in like a school bus, like we weren't like stopping at stops or anything. So I'm not sure really what the deal was. Maybe the driver was just trying to like burn time or something. But um, it just I use as an example of where um, it's an example of how that convenience that people with able bodies, take for granted, that the way transportation is for them, they take for granted, just because, you don't have to deal with, the excessively long wait times, those weird windows. Also another thing is, and I mean, they've tried to improve this, but also crossing county lines. That's another thing that can be challenging. And, what if you have to go a really long distance? Like, let's say, like, it can be really challenging if you want to, let's say you want to let's say you have a flight out of the country. I mean, and there's, of course, flying. That's a whole other thing, right? If you're a person with a disability. But let's just talk about transportation with four wheels. So if you want to get down to, say, Maryland to catch a flight or something, well, I mean, that's a whole like big kind of ordeal in itself. So, you know, there are lots of challenges just locally, just getting to appointments, getting to like social things. There are a lot of challenges there in terms of access, in terms of convenience. But then there are even more challenges, moving out, beyond those local limits. So that's going to depend on, one of the things that people can do is, if you have the financial means, you can always look at buying a vehicle through like a conversion provider like Total Mobility. I'll just use them as an example. We have some people here that have used them. But let's say you're not in a situation financially where that's a possibility, then you could work through your waiver provider to find non-medical transportation providers. And there are a number of different ones. Unfortunately, transportation as a business is very challenging. That's a really challenging space. And it's just challenging, I say, not even as like, a profit generator. It's challenging just to even break even with that type of service. So there aren't a lot of providers, but you can talk to your waiver provider, and if you're in Community Health Choices, talk to your MCO service coordinator, and because those services should be available. And then from there, they'll hook you up with the providers. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's certainly not. We hear, continue to hear complaints and stuff and issues that pop up. But it's important that said, I think it's important for all of us to continue to use the services and to be vocal and to advocate for better services and to advocate for better implementation of those services and for more investment so that the services can be, at least like, let's try to shoot for parity, so that, transportation can be as convenient for people with disabilities as it is for people without disabilities.